Alrighty, there is a lot of turbulence here in Canada. You have the polls, you have the media that is attacking Pierre Poilievre on every single front with false flags, false liberal hopes, saying that Pierre is tanking in the polls with his popularity, and liberals are surging to the point where now there's even speculation that Mark Carney, should he be elected, when he's elected, let's be honest, is going to call an early election, and Jagmeet's jumping on right behind him saying, yeah, we're also going to call an election or prepare for an election. So that's kind of weird, because I don't know how Mark Carney's ever going to win a federal election. People don't know who he is, but we're going to be talking about that later on. We're also going to be taking a look at the fact that Pierre Poilievre is really going to be cracking down on immigration and asylum seekers that are coming into Canada and people that are just illegally crossing. And then we also have confirmation from Mélanie Joly, Justin Trudeau's mistress, allegedly, hypothetically, theoretically, whatever, that Canada and America could be working together on a joint task force for Navy for increasing patrols around our continent, which is super badass. But Canada is also preparing to put more sanctions on Russia if Russia doesn't comply with these peace talks, peace negotiations with Ukraine as Trump the mediator. A lot to talk about in this video. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. And without further ado, let's get into some of these polls and how it's super, super bizarre. So we all know that Pierre Poilievre has had a astronomical lead. And what the Liberals want you to believe is that Pierre is tanking in the polls because he's at 205 projected seats, or 42% on this poll, and that Mark Carney and Liberals are skyrocketing up. Now, there is a bump in popularity from Mark Carney, but that's just because it's not Trudeau anymore. And people are like, oh, yes, I'm relieved. But again, people don't know who Mark Carney is. On this Abacus data poll, you have Conservatives at 46% and the Liberals at 27%. And then on this poll tracker, you have Conservatives, Pierre, at 42% and Liberals at 25%. Then you have Chrystia Freeland saying we can't afford his weakness, referring to Pierre Poilievre, which is super bizarre. Then you have people that are attacking Pierre and his wife, saying these two are broken and Canada is not. Very, very strange. Mark Carney is vowing to use federal powers, federal emergency powers, to build homes, clean energy projects, and trade corridors, which is super scary because, as you can see, he's a massive part of the World Economic Forum. And then when you simply Google Liberals closing the gap, and chances are you've either seen ads like this on social media, or maybe you've seen headlines like this on social media. Liberals are closing the gap. Conservatives are still frontrunners, but hemorrhaging support. Federal ballot tracking shows Liberals are closing the gap, And it's just like all these false flags are wanting you to believe that the Liberals are catching up, and they are 100% not. And every media, every Liberal supporter right now, every Liberal MP, they're using this time to attack Pierre, to attack his wife. And it's just extremely crazy because nothing has changed. Since Trudeau's resigned, nothing has changed. Pierre's messaging had a little bit of turbulence, a little bit of divisiveness in what he was saying, but not enough for him to tank in the polls or for the Liberals to rise in the polls. So kind of crazy. But the Conservatives did get together yesterday or the day prior in Parliament for a bit of a meeting to reschedule everything, to re-strategize everything. So let's take a look at some of those Conservatives that are being stopped in the hallways here.
You guys still think the next election is going to be about the carbon tax?
Most Conservative MPs
Are you worried about the polls?
didn't have much to say.
All I can say is good morning, folks. Happy to be back. No comments from me today.
But those who did talk before a 6-hour caucus meeting had one clear target: Mark Carney.
We've been consistently concerned about carbon tax Carney's failure to provide any transparency to Canadians.
Carbon tax Carney.
The Conservatives trying to keep their axe the tax lines alive, despite the fact that Carney and Pierre Poilievre have basically the same position on the key issue.
My government will immediately remove the consumer carbon tax.
With Justin Trudeau leaving and the Liberals moving on from the consumer carbon tax, old slogans like this.
And we understand that everything in Canada is broken after 8 years of Trudeau and the costly coalition.
Why won't we have a carbon tax election now?
don't seem to be working for Pierre Poilievre anymore. Numerous polls had the Conservatives with a 20-plus point lead over the Liberals at the start of 2025. Now it's single digits.
If they became our 51st state, it would be the greatest thing they could ever do.
Thanks to U.S. President Donald Trump's consistent threats against Canada. But Poilievre's planning to pivot Saturday to a Canada First message at a rally in Ottawa that attendees are being asked to wear red and white to. Trying to ride the wave of patriotism that's sweeping over the country, but attacking Donald Trump might be harder for Poilievre, with polling showing 44% of Conservative voters have a positive view of the U.S. president. Only 12% of Liberals and 8% of New Democrats share the same opinion.
Donald Trump's threats against Canada have forced the Conservatives to look at their message to see if it's resonating, if it's the right one.
One person the Conservatives aren't mentioning, Chrystia Freeland, a sign the Tories believe Carney's their biggest threat in the next election, and a recent Leger poll backs that up, Carolyn, saying if Carney becomes the Liberal leader, he'd be tied with Poilievre in the polls.
Yeah, see, stuff like that. I mean, that's absolutely absurd. Pierre Poilievre has done a tremendous job in the House of Commons. Pierre Poilievre has been extremely vocal. He's built a massive following on social media. He's built a massive presence here in Canada. Americans know him. Trump knows who he is. Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan must know who he is. I know that doesn't have a direct impact on how Canadian voters know him, but he's done these huge podcasts, gotten millions and millions of views. So very, very weird for the media to come out and say that this random guy who was in the shadows, he was a banker way back in the day, but he's been floating in the shadows for years, is somehow going to beat Pierre Poilievre, or is almost as popular as Pierre Poilievre. That just seems so inappropriate to put out that information. And I guess I do apologize for, falling for that trap, man. I did make a video saying that, oh my God, they are catching up to him. Hey, look, we're all human. We all make mistakes. And so I just want to take this time right now to say, I'm sorry. And then who should also be sorry is Justin Trudeau. So, of course, Justin Trudeau reached out, or he congratulated Syria's interim president today, despite the fact that he leads the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an organization that Canada has declared a terrorist group 12 years ago. So he leads them. So Syria's interim president is a terrorist, and Justin Trudeau reached out to him and said, congratulations on your interim winning. Super bizarre, man. Like, why doesn't the media, the mainstream media, report on that? Why doesn't the media say, look, Justin Trudeau's talking with terrorists, he's a terrorist sympathizer? You don't get that type of publicity from the mainstream media, and it's so frustrating because it makes me feel like it's almost not real. I almost need that validity that the media acknowledges it, and they don't. And it starts to mess with me a little bit. I check myself. It's not like it has to be, that's not the golden standard that it has to be on the media, but I would like for it to be on the media, and it messes with my brain chemistry sometimes a little bit too much that they just ignore it. And I just feel so freaking gaslit. It's frustrating, folks. So if you feel that way, just know that you aren't alone. Then you have Melissa Lantsman that was also stopped in Parliament, and she had this to say when reporters asked her some questions.
Mark Carney again admitted his own lie about not wanting to impose a carbon tax. In fact, he says he's changing the carbon tax, a new and bigger carbon tax, and in particular insanity, a carbon tax on steelmakers at a time where we're staring down tariffs. This is not axing the carbon tax. There is only one party that will do that. This is a new and bigger carbon tax.
Yeah. I mean, that's the scary part of Mark Carney is these words, the wording on everything that he uses. It's so bizarre. Look, when they say Justin Trudeau is controlled by the World Economic Forum, he's just a puppet. Mark Carney is the World Economic Forum. He's a more evolved boss than Justin Trudeau. And so if we thought we had it bad and rough under Trudeau, Mark Carney is going to make it significantly worse. And then we've got Pierre Poilievre here, who has this to say on how he's going to go after little loopholes in our border security and all that stuff, such as Roxham Road. Let's take a look.
One of the other things that's happening in the States right now in the new administration is that President Trump has been serious about deportations. And a couple weeks ago, we had Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that if he were the Canadians, he'd be concerned that a lot of the bad people there in the United States right now might try to sneak up into Canada. This happened last time Trump was president, Mr. Trump was president, where we had people crossing illegally through Roxham Road, thousands and thousands and thousands. And it was disgraceful. I went there myself, Pierre, and I couldn't believe it. You had CBSA officers acting like bellhops, lifting their suitcases, putting them into buses, taking them to Toronto or Montreal, their choice. They got to choose where they would go. So we were sort of facilitating illegal entry into our country. I believe Roxham Road has been closed, but I'm sure that happens in other places. I'm wondering, what would you do to stop bad people that are about to be deported from the United States from just walking across into Canada?
Well, they closed Roxham Road 30 days after I issued an ultimatum to Justin Trudeau that he had to close it, or that we would move a non-confidence. And so he actually met my ultimatum and closed it, which proved that what they had been saying before was all a lie. They claimed they had no way of closing it. Well, of course they had a way of closing it. They didn't want to. We're a nation with borders, and we have the ability to seal our borders against illegal crossers and to block people from coming in. And those that get onto our soil, what you need to do is just do a last in, first out refugee review of their claim. And this is how it works. If you're the last person into the country, then you immediately have your claim heard, which means that within a couple of weeks, if your claim is false, you're sent back. What that does is it sends the signal to everyone who might come in the future that they're going to be sent home automatically. The problem right now is that if someone gets in illegally, they then, and even if they're not a real refugee, they're not fleeing danger, they have 7 or 8 years of appeals, during which we're paying for hotels and lawyers and food.
Healthcare above and beyond what Canadians get.
Above and beyond what Canadians get.
Yeah, I think the average asylum seeker gets paid, I think it was like $76,000 a year or $82,000 a year. Like, that's a lot of money. That's above the average wage in Canada. That's insane. So if you're making like $55,000, $60,000 a year, you could, basically burn up your passport and seek asylum and get paid more money, theoretically, right? I'm not suggesting anyone does that, but that's a huge loophole in our system.
Yeah. So that then attracts more people to say, oh, hey, if I get to Canada, even though I'm not a real refugee, I can get into the country and I'll be bounced around in the system at someone else's expense forever. If we solve that problem, the message would go out very quickly that Canada is not a place you come to make a false or fraudulent claim. And I believe you would see a very real reduction in the number of people who even tried to come. I have a lot of sympathy for real refugees. My wife is a refugee. This has been a wonderful refuge for people who genuinely have claims, and that still will be the case when I'm Prime Minister. But we can't take in fraudulent fake claimants and pay their bills for 7 years while they work the system.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big freaking part of the problem right now is Canada's programs that we've had, the way Canada's been set up, it's not inherently bad. Our systems, our refugee, our immigration, right, our social programs, they're not inherently bad. However, where we are right now with how much debt we're in, how much money these liberals have been spending and printing, just ignoring common sense and how to manage a country, the way that these loopholes are being taken advantage of, they haven't done anything. They've just sat back and watched. You know that meme of the little girl that's standing out in the middle of the road and she's like got a little devious smile on her, like a grin, and behind her there's a house on fire, and it just kind of gives you the idea maybe she set the house on fire. That is what's happening with the liberals. They're just smiling, going, ha, ha, ha. Meanwhile, economically speaking, and just, all these loopholes are being taken advantage of. The fact that people from other countries can go on the Canadian government website, see how much they're going to get paid. They can figure out through social media, through word of mouth, exactly what they need to say to come to this country, to check all the boxes. And it's not like we don't have a system set up to really screen people. It's just somebody that sits there with a pen and paper and a checkbox, goes, okay, are you this? Are you that? This is where you came from. Okay, you don't have money, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you qualify. Here's all your money. Here's your info. Go to this hotel, go to this address, and you're going to be set up, and, good luck. Welcome to Canada. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. And it also discredits all the real refugee claims that Canada has. Canada is a wonderful country, and we've been peacekeepers. We've provided help to a lot of countries, a lot of people. And if people are fleeing real disaster, real harm in other countries, they've always been welcome to come to Canada. I've never had a problem with that. I don't know if you've ever had a problem with that, but when it gets abused the way that it is right now, that's a serious issue. And the Liberals don't freaking care. They don't care. And I haven't heard Mark Carney say anything about that. But that's my opinion, folks. I'd love to know yours. Then you have the media trying to bring back national pride over National Flag Day. Kind of crazy. Let's take a look here at how patriotic all of a sudden Liberals have become.
Canadian flags and flagpoles are flying off the shelves in Winnipeg. This as Canadians get set to celebrate Flag Day on Saturday.
One at the lake and one in the city.
Sharon Taylor is buying 2 Canadian flags to show off the pride she has for her country.
I really don't like what's happening as far as Trump or the president is stating that they want to make us the 51st state, and I never want that to happen.
Taylor says the talk from down south is really bothering her, and that's why she's here.
It's kind of nice because it's merging all of us as Canadians to take a stand.
It appears Canadian pride is growing because of the tension with our southern neighbor.
There's a broader feeling happening, and we put numbers to it.
Leger says a poll from over the weekend shows more than half of people said they are very proud to be Canadian, a 14% bump from last June.
I think it's got Canadians mad, and they want to demonstrate that, and they're proud of who we are.
Leger also said, based on other responses, people are focusing more on buying local and canceling trips to the U.S. There may be even some places closer to home. This week, the International Peace Gardens at the Manitoba-U.S. border said they've received strongly worded emails from individuals who say they won't visit the gardens this year.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's nice to see this level of patriotism, and it sucks that it's only really happened because our sovereignty has been threatened by America, by Donald Trump. But now let's take a look here at Mark Carney, because what he just said in the past couple of days is kind of scary. If it's true, if it's not true, I don't know, but people are taking it as one context, and this whole new narrative is building off of it. Mark Carney gave a speech the other day. And in that speech, people are now speculating that he is going to call an early election based off of the things that he said in the speech. Let's take a listen.
This is for my colleagues in Ottawa. With Trump threatening to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum on March 12, your fellow leadership candidate, Christian Freeland, says it would not be ideal to go to the polls right after your party selects its new leader on March 9. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a very fluid situation. The discussions with the Americans, the demands of the Americans change, or at least of the president, change on an almost daily basis, as do the timelines. The government is currently engaged in direct discussions with the Trump administration. You never take a decision before you need to take a decision. And so nothing is pre-wired. Let's see what the situation is in the middle of March and do what is best for Canadians. And the government will do what's best for Canadians. If Parliament needs to be recalled for certain reasons, it will be. If it makes sense to get a strong mandate at that point, that is what will follow. But make no mistake, and I think this is a message for the United States, is that Canadians, and I'm not speaking about leadership contenders, I'm not speaking about current governments, federal or provincial. Canadians are united on this issue. Canadians have a strong sense of resolve. We're going to stand up collectively for Canada, and we're going to build our economy here in Canada first and foremost. And we'll see what arrangements we come with the Americans when we get to the table.
Oh my goodness. I don't know, man. There's so many different ways that this could go. He could call an election. He could technically pro-government again. There's just so many different ways. But one person who's jumping on the bandwagon is Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet is saying that he is preparing, him and his party are preparing for an early election based off of what Mark Carney has been saying. Let's take a listen.
All right, so I want to ask about this memo that was going around to NDP candidates talking about the prospect of an election call as soon as March 10th. The NDP still needs about 200 candidates to have a full slate by that date if the election were called then. And we're seeing, polling pointing to, a potential trend of NDP supporters breaking off to the Liberals. How do you try to get people back on board, especially if an election is happening within 3 weeks here?
Yeah, our understanding is Mark Carney is going to call an early election. So we're preparing for that. We're getting ready for that. We've nominated 140 candidates already, more to come. And so we'll be ready to fight this election. This election is going to be an important choice. And so I want to remind folks, the Liberals have had 9 years. What has happened in those 9 years since the Liberals have been in power? Well, your cost of homes went up, cost of groceries went up. Things are worse now. Ask yourself, are you better now after 9 years of Liberals, or are you worse off? Canadians are going to say they're worse off. Changing the leader doesn't change the fact that they had 9 years to make your life better and they made it worse. And now what about the Conservatives? Well, Pierre Poilievre is proposing to do things that are going to make your life worse. He said that he wants to cut childcare. That's going to cost families at a minimum $8,000 a year if he cuts childcare. He wants to cut the child benefit. That's another $600 a month for working families, for everyday folks. He wants to cut the dental care program for seniors. Seniors who barely just got the dignity of getting their teeth fixed. Over 1.5 million people have been able to get their teeth fixed with the new Democrat dental plan. He wants to cut that. He doesn't think people deserve that. That's going to cost people. He wants to propose cuts that will hurt people, that will cost people. He's voted against these things, and he's going to put in place cuts that are going to hurt you. And what do we want to do? We want to defend those things that people need, invest in our healthcare, take better care of people, and lower your bills. Take on the corporate greed that's driving up the cost of your groceries. Bring down the cost of housing so people can afford a home. I think the choice is clear in this next election. Democrats have your back.
New Democrats have your back. Oh my goodness. I feel like I would lose so much respect for somebody if I knew that they were voting for Jagmeet Singh. I just cannot believe that that guy has any support at all in this country. He is probably the worst politician. He held 40 plus million people hostage to a coalition government that no one voted for, nobody wanted, and caused so much freaking harm. But the point of that video was, hey, we might see an early election that could not come from a vote of non-confidence, but could just come from Mark Carney himself, which obviously would be supported by not only all the parties, but pretty much most Canadians would support an election, which is an interesting path to explore. I don't know how much I believe that, but I mean, if it happens, all the power to us. That would be phenomenal. And now we're going to take a look here at Justin Trudeau's mistress, Mélanie Joly.
Minister, do you see with recently the announced joint fentanyl money laundering task force in Canada and more cooperation with the United States?
Yep.
Is there a possibility that we could see a joint naval with U.S. Canada nuclear subs in the patrolling the Arctic and Canada's waters to protect our nation, because we know they have nuclear subs on the other side?
Well, so a couple of things. We are now looking at what type of submarines we will buy, and we want to make sure that we can buy submarines that are able to go and patrol the Arctic, particularly as the Arctic is melting and the Northwest Passage becomes one of the fastest way between Asia and Europe. And we need to protect our own sovereignty, and we need to protect in general NATO and NORAD territory. When it comes to working with American troops, we do a lot of naval cooperation already, and we're always ready to see what we can do more.
That wasn't very
yes,
satisfying
I was
answer.
reading the communique, which I found, but it wasn't quite clear to me. Are you suggesting that if Russia doesn't enter into good faith negotiations over Ukraine, there would be more sanctions against Russia, and particularly on oil and gas?
Well, we believe that it is fundamental to use the sanctions as a way to put more pressure on Russia, and this is something that also is important to our American friends as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
More sanctions on Russia if they don't comply. I have a good feeling, a good good feeling about all this, where Trump is going to be a good mediator between Russia and Ukraine. He's already expressed interest in going to Moscow and meeting with Putin in person. And I think Xi Jinping, leader of China, would also be there. And then he's also invited Putin over to the White House, which would be the first time that Putin has come back to America since 2015, I believe. And then every country around the world. Well, that's kind of crazy because he's like listed as a terrorist now on a watch list. Putin is. So it's interesting because they would have to remove all of those, because that technically means the moment he lands in America, he would be arrested, which would be one heck of a warm welcome for the president of Russia. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of global tensions, but it does seem here in Canada like we are headed on the right path. Even though there's slander campaigns and attacks geared towards Pierre Poilievre and his wife, which are totally undeserved, we are heading into an election. Whether that happens in the next month, in a couple of months, or later in October, it really seems slated in Pierre's favor that he is going to win the election. That's in the video, folks. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. If you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you later on. Bye for now.